start. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the second episode of the Blue Cloud Ocean Literacy Series webinar. So, our first episode took place in December, and today we are having the second one, which focuses on a different but important topic. So, the webinar is entitled How Industrial Data Can Bridge Critical Ocean Knowledge Gaps. So, as you may know, we have a high number of marine researchers, and there is high amounts of data that is collected from researchers. But it is important to be aware that usually when we talk about the research bubble, the researchers can and should also collaborate with industry players, mostly also from marine science, because also industry players are able to collect additional data that can be very important and are relevant for marine research. And this is why we're having this webinar today, to expand our mind further and to demonstrate that marine science can also benefit if marine community collaborates also with the industry side. And in fact, according to latest research, there is an estimation that only 3% of all the biodiversity data comes from industry. So these numbers should increase a lot in next years. And we hope this webinar gives you inspiration of what kind of collaboration that can be done. So for today, I'm happy to showcase you the agenda. We have different speakers to tell you a nice story about collaboration between researchers and industry. But first things first, we'll give the floor to the Blue Cloud coordinator, Sara Pitonet, who will give an overview of why Blue Cloud exists and what is the work that Blue Cloud has been doing since its creation. And after that, we'll hear from Laura Viana from TGS, where she will showcase and explain why companies should indeed share ocean data. After the intro from Laura, we'll give the floor to our colleagues from EMODNet. We'll start with Kate Larkin, EMODNet Secretariat, and then we'll give the floor to Dick Schaap from Maris, also the coordinator of EMODNet in the session. After that, we'll give the floor to our colleagues Tom Reed from Hub Ocean and Clara Fonseca from OBIS Brazil, who will start telling you the story about how industry has been collaborating into this topic. One thing I would like to highlight is that during the webinar, you can, and you should, if you want to, pose your question to our speakers. You have two ways. You either write the question in your Q&A area interface you have on Zoom. If you want to talk directly to our speakers, we propose you to raise the hand, and depending on time, we may give you the floor to talk directly to them. But one important point I'll also like to highlight is that our speakers, Laura and Kate, they need to leave very shortly after their presentation. So if you want to pose a question, we propose you to write that right after on the Q&A, so they have time to reply to those before they leave. And after that, we'll have again Sara Pitonet to close the webinar, and also a very nice update about the third episode of the Ocean Literacies webinar series that we organize in Blue Cloud. But one thing at a time. Now I'm happy to give the floor to Sara, who will talk about Blue Cloud.
Thank you very much, Rita, and thank you everybody for joining this second webinar of this series. I'm very glad to be here and hosted as coordinator of the Blue Cloud project, which actually we keep on calling Blue Cloud, but is actually evolving into something bigger. So we started, for those who don't know the project, we started 6 years ago in 2019, when the first Blue Cloud project was funded by the Horizon Europe, at the time Horizon 2020 program of the European Commission. It was the first attempt, successful actually, attempt to prove the value of federating, on one side, key data services, including those from EMODNet that you'll hear about by the presenters today, but also from Copernicus Marine, and the work of other research infrastructure, let's say, that were brought together within a digital platform. The platform evolved, and in 2023, a second edition of the project was funded, where the infrastructure, the virtual research environment that was developed, It's a full operational phase with the establishment of virtual research environment. We had 5 at the beginning that were there to test in real life scenarios of how the technical and scientific and data products and services federated within the virtual research environment can be used to advance marine research and to release new products, new services. The community started growing as well as the context where the project operated. Blue Cloud is funded under the remit of, as I said, Horizon Europe as an infrastructural project under the EOSC umbrella, so the umbrella of the program called the European Open Science Cloud. Over these years, this program has grown and has taken the shape of a federation. So under the mandate of the European Commission, DG RTD, DG Connecting particularly, a federation of entities that are now called Node has been developed and is growing to build a system of systems to allow federated research infrastructures to be linked and seamlessly connected under the European, a unique European federation. So that's where now the Blue Cloud position itself. And since last year, Blue Cloud has been formally recognized as one of these nodes, in particular the nodes supporting the digital twin of the ocean, the digital twin ocean within the EOSC remit. So what is the strategic landscape? Here we take the words of Nicolas Segebar, project officer and policy officer at DG RTD at the Federation workshop we organized last November, kept on reminding us that as the ocean doesn't work in silence, we shouldn't as well. So that's where this context is now taking force. So Blue Cloud and the EOSC node Digital Twin Ocean responds to a European mandate of unifying digital ecosystem under, as I said, the EOSC Federation umbrella as the horizontal technological, let's say, infrastructure for European research. To respond to the mission, restore our ocean and waters objectives, so for a clear and policy-driven societal objectives to respond to the need of safeguarding our oceans and waters. And last but not least, to support the nascent European digital twin of the ocean, and in particular its operational infrastructure, EDITO for marine science. So we need to ensure that these pillars are all technically and operationally interconnected. And nowadays, the EOSC node Digital Twin Ocean is called to take this role as a bridge in this context. So how we're doing that? Well, exactly as we have been doing this since 2019. So we are, Blue Cloud is performing, is empowering research with a set of technological solutions. So on one side, we provide facilities to work and perform harmonized data collections for semantic enrichment, tracking, working also in close connections with the data providers and data aggregators, including AMONet that's with us today. But then there is still the virtual research environment, so the place where researchers can access tools for computing, for reproducing workloads, for application management, and so run experiments, develop models, develop maps, and other functionalities. All of this is EOSC ready. It means that All the services developed are integrated and in alignment with the standards and principles and methodologies that are at the baseline of the European Open Science Cloud, that catalogs that are there are structured for immediate federation with the other resources, and as well as all the, say, operations, which follows monitoring activities and offer the solutions aligned with those of the broader EOSC. So this is the set of services that are currently available in the node. So the core services are, to say, the backbone, the technological infrastructural framework. On top of that, there are generic services and data management facilities that can be customized, used and customized for specific scientific pipelines. And down you can see the current applications of these services as they were implemented in the project so far. So a number of virtual labs and workbenches on specific scientific challenges that are releasing products, for instance, for coastal ocean observation, carbon plankton dynamics, or marine environmental indicators. We have a specific virtual lab on fisheries, and data flows production on the environmental ocean variables. And just to conclude, so we are now kickstarting a new phase where the integration between this environment and Edito should really become effective and real. This will be done via interoperability pathway through some sustainability actions to ensure the flow of applications from the EOSC node environment into the Edito platform, and again to respond to long-term needs of the digital twin of the ocean program. That's where we are now. So we're implementing new use cases. We are evolving the current one, and we are working with Edito to make them further accessible to a broader number of users. On the other way, we are sharing all these practices within the use communities so that the model that we are building, this blueprint, can also be useful for other thematic communities that are implementing similar technological approaches. And I just conclude by inviting you to browse not just the website, but also a specific area, which is the Training Academy, because we are releasing a number of training materials on how to use the services release, but also about the virtual research environment, how it is built, so that they can give you a better view of what we are doing. We are doing so in collaboration with the Ocean Teacher Global Academy. And I conclude here, Rita, and happy to give you back the floor.
Thank you very much, Sara, for the Book Cloud overview. Now is about time to give the floor to our first guest of today, who is Laura Viana from TGS, who is going to tell us why it's important for companies to share their marine data with researchers. Laura, for sure you have lots to tell about that.
Thanks, Rita. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. First, I would like to thank Habotion and Blue Cloud for the invitation and opportunity to join this session. And to briefly introduce myself, I'm Laura. My background is in biology, and today I'm working as a global environmental manager at TGS. But before that, I spent about 10 years with an environmental consulting company where I was responsible for implementing marine biota monitoring projects during seismic surveys. So I'm really looking forward to sharing our perspective as a company. motivations and challenges when sharing environmental data, and to explore with you better ways of understanding the ocean. So just to get started, I want to explain why TGS collects a substantial amount of environmental and biodiversity data. That's because TGS is a global energy data company, and our core activity is to conduct acquisition of geophysical data and offshore basins. So we have an active fleet of 7 vessels, seismic vessels, and we operate worldwide collecting geophysical data. So to prevent and mitigate the impacts of our operations, our seismic vessels operate with marine mammals observers and passive acoustic monitoring operators, and they are responsible for monitoring the exclusion zone, which is the area around the center of the seismic source. So this area will vary depending, the size of the area will vary depending on where we operate. It's usually 500 meters, but sometimes, as for example in Brazil, it's 1,000 meters around the center of the seismic source. And they will monitor this area and require a delay on the start of the source, or depending on where we are, for example in Brazil, it requires the shutdown of the source whenever marine mammal or sea turtle is observed within this radio. So this effort will produce a lot of records from marine mammals and sea turtle. And in addition to this, depending on where we operate, the sensitivity of the region, we may also be required to develop some dedicated environmental monitoring projects, like targeted research projects, before and during the seismic operations, and which we will collect a lot of data using different methodologies. So visual observation, acoustic monitoring, telemetry data collection, oceanographic data collection. Sometimes we need to collect data from nutrients, plankton, etc. So all these efforts produce a substantial amount of biodiversity data that can help to fill critical ocean knowledge gaps. So touching based on our motivation for sharing data, TGS acknowledges the importance of oceanographic data and the need to continuously increase our common understanding of the ocean where we operate. And TGS support the Sustainable Development Goal SDG 14, which is life below water. And one of the targets is to increase scientific knowledge by sharing oceanographic data. So to explore and demonstrate the benefits of sharing ocean data to better understand the ocean, navigate the negative effects, and create positive value, we start a collaboration with HubOcean in 2023. And as a first case, to explore these benefits, we decided to share data from sea turtles and marine mammals observations in Brazil, along with the oceanographic data collected during the same surveys. So with this, we were looking at encouraging scientific engagement to enhance the understanding of marine mammals distributions and patterns in the region, and to understand which environmental variables could be employed as a driver of cetaceans' presence, and then consequently understand if we could optimize our acquisition planning, increase efficiency by reducing the time in the area, if we could reduce the number of encounters we had with marine life in the area, and so also cut CO2 emissions. And we also understand that by sharing this type of data, we could in the future support the improvement of ocean ecosystem models. And with this, we are also showing case on our acting on SDG 14, which is also important for the company. So I said we were wondering how all this data would look like if aggregated instead of assessed in a project by project basis, as it was. And if by sharing this data, we could benefit the industry, society, and also benefit TGS by better organizing this data and understand if we could use this to enhance our project planning. So this is the data set we shared with HubOcean. So the first step was to identify which data we were going to share. And then we needed to find this data because as this is not our core activity and the data is collected by different environmental contractors, it's not always very easy to find everything. But we managed to find all the data, and we share data from marine mammals and sea turtle observations from 2008 to 2024, comprising more than 4,000 records. Data from currents from the DCP from the same surveys, and data from the CTD profiles, which stand for conductivity, temperature, and depth. So on the right-hand side, you can see all the data we shared. In orange, data from currents, and yellow from marine mammals and sea turtles, and on purple from the CTD profile. This is the coast of Brazil. But we understand that one thing is to share data, but then we need to make this data accessible and ready for analysis. And then another step would be how we can create knowledge with all the data we shared. So all the data we had, as I said, they were collected by different environmental contractors. We had different structures, different file types, different standards. So thanks to Habotian, Habotian managed to streamline and standardize all this data for consumption. And now we have all the data available at the Ocean Data Platform. And we are on the step that we need to communicate with scientific community to enable some analysis. So we really would like to see if this data could support modeling of distributions and concentration trends, to identify preferred habitats for the species. As you can see on the right side, we were looking at if we could correlate data from the CTD profiles, for example, temperature here as an example, with marine mammal sightings, so we could understand which environmental variables could drive the presence of the marine mammals, and then analyze if we could enable more efficient surveys, reduce CO2 emissions, and enable also the improvement of ocean management plans. So we understand that by sharing this type of data would be benefiting the industry, the regulators, and also the scientific community. And we are also looking to how can we improve now to have all this data standardized since the data collection, not only before sharing the data, so we can streamline the process. Here's just an example of how the industrial data can help to fill critical data gaps. So it's an illustration of our data along with the data from OBIS. So the data currently available in OBIS is in yellow. We can see that is more coastal, while TGS data, the data we shared, is located in deep water. So it leads to an increase in 54% in the number of data points of marine mammals observations in Brazil. We had the opportunity to present this case in a few occasions. So we presented this to our industry peers in an event in 2024 to also engage them and share this type of data. And just before I conclude, I would like to touch in some challenges that we have. We have been discussing as company to ensure the responsible use of the data. So the first point is that it's important for us to avoid misinterpretation, to ensure that the context is taken into account. So for example, strandings may seem to rise in a region simply because the beach monitoring effort began along with a seismic survey with no systematic effort done before. So it might not be because of a direct impact. So this type of information needs to be taken into account. The data needs to be assessed carefully before publishing. And the other concern that has been arising in Brazil is that too often the data is collected locally, but then published internationally with any local involvement. So we are discussing with the industry and local research community how we can define clear terms and timeline to ensure local participation and to spur maybe joint publications or collaboration before the data is released. I think this is something that Clara will also touch on her speak later today. So yeah, that's all from my side. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hi, Laura, thank you for your presentation. A reminder, if there is a question to Laura, please use your time now to write on the Q&A area before Laura needs to leave for other professional commitments. And before I give the floor to Kate, in fact, what Laura raised here, an important point that besides collecting these data, is important to make these data accessible. So in order to be able to be used by others and to be also combined with the kinds of data. But Laura you also raise a point, Laura, that to not forget to involve the local people when sharing those data international platforms. So it's natural that it's important to ensure the data is available out there, but naturally the people who are involved directly on those initiatives should also have a voice and have a role when taking care of their data and see where the data is going. And in Europe there is these principles in order to improve data sharing, which is the fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So that's a good practice that in generically anyone who's collecting data, not just a marine landscape, should try to follow in order to promote, let's say, open science and collaborative science. And with this, Laura, thank you. Let's see, someone drops any comment before you leave, but in the meantime, I'm happy to give the floor to my colleagues from EMODNET, which is the European Marine Observation and Data Network. But first, we will start with Kate, who will share some words about EMODNET. Are you ready, Kate?
Thank you very much, Rita and colleagues. Yes, I am starting to share my screen, so it should come up imminently.
Yeah.
Yes.
All fine. Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. Thanks a lot for the invitation to be here today. I'm joined, as Rita introduced, with many experts from EMODNET. Some are directly partners in the Blue Cloud project, and many others are connecting with Blue Cloud and the wider marine and maritime observation and data landscape. So I hope in this talk today I can give you an overview of EMODNET, how it sits in the European marine data landscape. Obviously, there's a really important global context as well, and EMODNET is contributing to a number of global data initiatives like OBIS that you'll hear from later, like Seabed 2030 for bathymetry. But I won't have the time to go into the international components today. But I'll focus on what EMODNET is, the vision that the community has to expand the service so that it's ever more fit for purpose in terms of meeting the knowledge needs of European policy, and that includes European obligations to global policy like the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, but also how the service works with so many different data collection efforts across the public and private sectors, a little bit how we engage already with the private sector, and how we'd like to move forward to connect even more to support the use of EMODNET to underpin blue economy and competitiveness of business operations, but also to support, where possible, the corporate data sharing so that we can have, where relevant, as much information from the private sector as part of the marine knowledge baseline that we as society really deeply need. So just a couple of words on the European policy landscape. You may have followed the recent events from last year, even when the European Ocean Pact was launched, and just a couple of weeks ago, in the beginning of March in Brussels, we had a full week of ocean and marine knowledge events and activities. There is, under the Ocean Pact, there is an Ocean Observation Initiative, which has now been rebranded, if you like, as the Ocean Eye, and that's really spanning the full value chain of in situ observations, data and knowledge. EMODNET is a key data partner within this Ocean Eye, and the legal instrument for this Ocean Eye is the Ocean Act, which is really spanning a lot of existing European directives like the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive, but also connecting with more biodiversity relevant ones such as MSFD, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. So there's a lot of different policies. The acronyms, of course, we don't imagine that it's easy to remember all of them, but it's just to say that Europe has a strategy for the ocean. It has the Ocean Pact as an overarching and Ocean Eye is really key going forward to connect the value chain for both public and private sectors. Then in terms of the global ocean data ecosystem, I'm going to focus on Europe, but just to say here that eMudnet is very much connected with global efforts with the UN Ocean Decade, so the Ocean Data Sharing Coordination Office, but also Ocean Predict and others. We also have direct, as a DG Mare initiative of the Commission, eMudnet has direct engagement with different DGs, and the Commissioner, Kostas Kadis for Fisheries and Oceans, spoke at a recent conference of ours. And here you can see a quote here that just exemplifies really the core and invaluable service that eMudnet is providing, and it is a public service, so it's completely open and free, not just for European stakeholders, but globally as a resource. So if you would go to the eMudnet portal, emudnet.ec.europa.eu, you would find a single gateway into the eMudnet service. So it is a Europa domain, so it is an official European Commission service, fully public, so there's no need to log in. It's completely free to discover and then download data and data products, but it's much more than a repository, if you like. It's really a service where you can visualize data, download data and data products across 68 different parameters, across 7 broad thematics that you can see on the screen. But there's also many software that are open source, that drive and build the platform, and lots of tools and methodologies that are open access as well, so you can see how data products are produced. The full offer you can see on the screen. I won't go into it now, but the most important takeaway from this is that eMudnet spans the marine environment, so from the coast into the open ocean, but also human activities at sea. So we work with a lot of providers to make sure the installations from the blue economy, but also maritime spatial plans that integrate a lot of these platforms in a national waters are made available, and also are geospatially available to allow stakeholders to bring different data layers and integrated marine knowledge together. And as I mentioned, we are built within open source solutions. Just a mention on the standards we use, so not only European standards like the Inspire Directive, but also ISO standards and OGC. So we're offering not just the data and metadata in a standardized way, but with web services. And you can dive into the portal if you would like to discover more. Then in terms of a snapshot of what you can see in the power of sharing data, these data that you can see on the screen have come from thousands of different data collection efforts. We have public research, we have national authorities data, private sector data, citizen science data, and other NGO data. So all of these data, when it comes together, you can see the power of creating these maps that are harmonized across European scale, but also beyond. One example is when you bring together, for example, bathymetry data with EU member state maritime spatial plans. The maritime spatial plans, we work directly with the member states. So they are the national official plans that are submitted to the Commission, and we're making them geospatially available, and then for practitioners to be able to map and download data within, but also cross-border as well. And then just a note on who is eMudnet. I'm just one representative of many today, and you'll hear from Dick Sharp later. But eMudnet is a big federated system. We have 130, or actually more, 133 to be exact, of partner organizations across 33 countries. So not just the EU, but beyond. And you can see the different types of sectors, that public and private, that are funded by eMudnet. And then there's another massive circle of or ecosystem of data providers as well, not least as well the users as well, which are increasingly expanding. And the private sector is a really core engagement group, a user group, but also a data sharer for eMudnet. Here we have a picture from the recent conference that we had, where we had representatives from eMudnet who are sharing data, who are using data, spanning ports and marinas, geophysical survey companies, renewable energy companies, etc. We have a couple of quotes from Van Oort and Fugro, both in terms of the value of in situ data, which eMudnet is focusing on, but also how broad and diverse in situ data is, and how we need to have such an integrated approach, but also the direct use of eMudnet, which is really seen as a baseline foundational marine knowledge for siting of offshore wind farms, for example. It's not used as operational data. That's not the intention, to have operational bathymetry for navigation, for example. It's really this delayed mode baseline information to access the best possible marine knowledge when you need to understand an area, and that can save costs in reducing the need to go out and collect new information per se, or to direct your budgets to collect new data for new regions or new parameters that have not yet been collected. And to accelerate the dialogue and data sharing, and also the benefits for the private sector, we have a dedicated associated partnership scheme. You can see the members to date here, and anybody who's listening who might be interested, don't hesitate to contact myself or the Secretariat or others on this call, and we can send you further information. It's a free network that just has an application process through our steering committee. Then I just want to just a note on the future of eModnet that leads into the vision. Obviously, eModnet as a service itself is used by many different stakeholders. We have more than 140,000 visits and users per year on the portal itself, but we also, as eModnet, now provide all of the offer on the cloud through another European public initiative called the European Digital Twin of the Ocean. So this is really leveraging the power of all the data that's been made interoperable by eModnet, and also satellite data by Copernicus, and put it in one place on a data lake in the cloud, connect it with model capability, high performance computing, and you've got a really exciting new platform to do applications, scenario setting, etc. And eModnet is the official in situ data component of this digital twin ocean, the public European service. There are many digital twins out there, of course, but this is the main one in Europe that is the public service for the ocean component. And it's really seen as the future decision support tool for society, open not only again to Europe, but also beyond. Just last week, when I was at Oceanology International with Dick Sharp and others, there was the launch of a call for funding for bringing your data to Editor and also testing the system. So if you're interested to take a look, become a user, please access the editor.eu to find out more information on this. And I hope we can give these slides for all of you to have a look at afterwards. And then obviously the digitalization, the services of eModnet have already gone through a really big expansion and evolution. But eModnet continues to evolve, and last year the community launched a decadal vision to 2035 to consolidate, but also to step change and expand the service offer and the services in general, and that obviously needs a lot more data. We have big gaps in the system, and whilst the European regional seas are very well mapped in terms of the seabed, the bathymetry, the biodiversity of benthic seafloor habitats, for example. We have broad scale, but we don't yet have highest resolution or all of the parameters we need. It's the same for, say, the Arctic and polar regions, the deep ocean, which in Europe can go down to 6,000 or between 5,000 and 6,000 meters at its deepest point, which is very deep within national jurisdiction. So there is a real need to get data from all of these different areas. And of course, the coasts are heavily used. We have a lot of great data, but we need more and more in terms of making available to society for all of the different applications like coastal resilience and more. So this is where, of course, engaging beyond the classic traditional research data comes to play, and that's where the private sector, the blue economy, really has a big role to play. And here is just a snapshot from one of the pillars of the eModnet vision, where we connected between the public research and the private sector blue economy to have a sort of goal that by 2035, eModnet is really the go-to place, because there are many services out there, but the European Commission is funding eModnet long-term together with Copernicus, together with the digital twin, and really as a public resource, eModnet is the place to bring your in-situ data. It can be in many other repositories as well, but eModnet can serve as an aggregator, but also to be able to produce the best available data products on top as well. So I won't go through these in the interest of time, but just the takeaway being that we'd like to continue mobilizing and engaging with all the private sector, as well as all the other stakeholders, but to really expand and showcase how eMudnet can be used to support your business operations, but also to have those conversations about sharing of data, noting that there are sensitivities, there are commercial issues, sometimes with sharing data, but there are very many ways that you can share your data with eMudnet and still obviously retain the ownership, but also decide on the licensing of the data. So there are many levels of that, and we're very used to dealing with those types of challenges in eMudnet, in its data ingestion, thematics, and at the Secretariat. So I'll finish with the final slide. You can scan to access eMudnet, and then please feel free to download our vision and get in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Such a complete overview of the eMudnet. So it's important to be aware that eMudnet is the point for the in situ data. But now, we had Kate, but we still will hear more about eMudnet, but this time it will be from our guest, Dick Schaap from Mary's, who is the coordinator of eMudnet ingestion. So I suppose, Dick, your presentation will be focused on more specific aspects of eMudnet data, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Kate gave an excellent overview, of course, of eMudnet. And I will tell a little bit more about practicalities, let's say, how to share data with eMudnet, especially if you are not, let's say, not yet a core partner, but those, let's say, more third party that has also nice data that we would like to use and they would like to bring in to make better products. And if you look at the way that eMudnet is working, let's say eMudnet makes very good products, but those products are based on data. And for that reason, when eMudnet started in 2008, there was immediately a cooperation with a number of research infrastructures and data management infrastructures in Europe that already existed. And they more or less have the, I would say, have the access to the real observers, let's say those people and the organizations that collect data. And by having this cooperation, by these infrastructures and eMudnet, there was immediately a sort of acceleration that more parties wanted to share their data because they want to be part of the products that eMudnet was making. And that was so the products of eMudnet, they stimulated more data sharing because they were very good products. And many people were starting to use them. And by using them, they also thought I can contribute to make them even better. Now, those networks that are underpinning eMudnet are CDataNet, are Eurobis, are EGDI for the geological, ISIS for the, let's say, water quality and biota. And they already had nodes in many European countries. And what they do is they are data centers, national data centers, that are validating and also do long-term stewardship of data that's being collected. And in fact, they practice these FAIR protocols by which the data can be used in many ways. And if you look at the base, we have more than 1,000 data observers or data originators, and they all are brought together through these networks. As part of eMudnet, a project was started in 2017, a data ingestion, and that was in fact an idea to reach out to the third parties, to all the data that's still out there. And that is not yet, let's say, part of those channels, of those main trunks, the research infrastructures. And the mission of ingestion is identifying new data holders, helping them, motivating them, and also training them. And then in the end, let's say, bringing the data into the right formats by which it can be used by the thematic groups of eMudnet and can be contribute to better products. If you look at the principle, it's we have external data providers. Then we have the ingestion service that channels the submissions. Those submissions are then assigned to, say, capable data centers that are based up a little bit about region and on discipline, data discipline. And each of them, they deal with these submissions and they make the data available. And if possible, also populate them into these EU infrastructures by which they are converted to the common standards that are being used. And When that is done, then the AWNet automatics, they can use the data from those infrastructures, and those are the pipelines for them, and they can use it to include the data, the new data in the products and the services. And we, in this pipeline, from left to right, we make distinction in two stages or two phases. The first one is that we publish as is. That means that the metadata is being worked up somewhat from the after the submission, but the data itself is as it is, and it will be published on the AWNet Central Portal in the catalog. But there's also a second phase that there are data sets that can be elaborated to the standards. This is not always possible because there are very exotic standards sometimes around that people are using. But together with the providers, we also are educating them more and more that if they want to deliver more and better data, that they also already adopt some of these standards at base, by which the flow through the pipeline is easier, and then also the data will reach then that second level, that it can be fully integrated in the EU infrastructures, and by this used in AWNet products and thematics. For this, we use the FAIR principles, and they were already mentioned, I think 2 times already, so that's I don't have to repeat them, but the principle is a little bit like findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And especially those interoperable and reusable, those are key factors. For this, you really have to do a little bit more than only be found and be accessed, because you have to adopt the common standards. And those standards for this, we have so-called data management guidelines, and they are published on the ingestion part of the central portal. And it means in practice that you bring enough documentation by which it's possible for third parties and for users to identify what is the quality of the data and how can I use it. And here are some elements that can be involved. But it also is adapting exactly the standards that are used for these research infrastructures. The ingestion service has its own section on the portal, and it gives there the guidelines, it gives the principles, it gives the services, and one of the services is the submission service. If you look at the submissions over time, and I'm focusing here on the submission service, and say we see that we have now more than 2,000 submissions, and let's say about 900 of them, let's say, have been processed up to level 2, so they're fully integrated and fully standardized. While the other part, let's say, is published as is. If we look at where the data came from, the originators, then we see that most comes from academic circles, but also industry has quite a good percentage, and also government and NGOs, because especially NGOs, we see in marine litter, they're very active in beach litter, and also they are active also in biota. Now here we have some use cases. You can find these also on the website. These are different groups. It's a little bit, I would say, a potpourri, a collection of different types of successful cases where data has been submitted and fully elaborated. Then finally, I want to look a little bit at the value for users. And this is also, of course, something that also Kate already mentioned, but it's important to repeat this, that as AWNet, we offer free and open data, and that allows everybody to have a better understanding, but also to support them in their activities. And that could be science, but could also be blue environment or blue economy activities. And by contributing to AWNet, it will help you to adopt standards, to apply the fairness principles. And by fairness principles applying, it means that you can make your data more accessible and also more useful for many different applications, and not only for your initial use for which you have collected the data. Another thing is, of course, that sectors, they gain wider recognition by acknowledgement in the products, because we have a sort of track and trace mechanism in AWNet. All the products are using data, but the data has its own metadata. And by this, you can always see where the data comes from and how it was collected and by who it was brought forward. And finally, it's also important what Kate also mentioned, that AWNet is not only Europe, but it reaches out to a much larger part. It also is part of the global initiatives. And like the Digital Twin of the Ocean, like the global UN Ocean Decade, but also the, let's say, seabed 2030 for bathymetry, the OBIS, GBIF for biodiversity. And that means, in fact, that when you share data with EmoNet, and you can also later say proudly that you have shared also the data for those global initiatives. And that's, of course, important for the global environment and our well-being. And the last thing is that by sharing data, we also can prevent duplication. So you can make use of other people's data that already have a high quality, and that will reduce the cost for you as operators. And also it has less environmental impact, because even observations can have an environmental impact. I kept it short, I think also to keep up with the agenda a little bit, but I think you have now a quite good understanding about EmoNet, about the principles and what it offers, but also how you can share data with it.
Thanks, Dick, for your presentation. Indeed, you took less time than expected, but you were able to say the important things that about EmoNet ingestion. And thank you once again to highlight the importance of the FAIR principles, which we had mentioned earlier before, important to make these data accessible and also to be interoperable with other sources of data, and also for complementing Kate's presentation with these more operational aspects of EmoNet. So appreciated, Dick, your intervention. And with this, so we had Sarah, an overview of BlueCloud. Then we had Kate and Dick for an overview of EmoNet. And now I'm happy to give the floor to my guest, Tom Reed from HubOcean, who will start talking to give a glimpse about the role of industry that can have in collecting data and also sharing data.
Thanks,
Over
Rita.
to you, Tom.
Can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes, all good.
Okay, great. And thank you everybody for joining this webinar today. It's really nice to be able to bring together sort of the industrial perspective of why companies would want to share data, and also how it can be used both for public and for private uses. So I'll just say a few words about myself. My name's Tom Red, the Ocean Governance Manager at HubOcean. HubOcean is a not-for-profit independent foundation based in Norway. We work at a global level, so we do many different activities on data sharing and use of data globally around the world. We've been fortunate enough to do a lot of work in Brazil recently, and we worked with Laura on the data sharing that she talked about before, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that story. First of all, just a few things about the kinds of activities we do. So we straddle the industrial side of data and the use of data. So transforming ocean industries by encouraging companies to share and therefore use data and insights in a responsible way to improve their operations, and also accelerating marine protection is one of the focuses of HubOcean, and of course empowering educators and researchers. So the main way that we do that is by developing and running the Ocean Data Platform, which is a free, open, cloud-based geospatial analytics platform. I'll talk a little bit about the features on the next one. So it's a two-sided platform, effectively, so that allows people to easily upload and share and collaborate with data privately, but also to find, work with, and discover public data that is also on the platform. We like to think of it a little bit of a hub and spoke model. So if you think about data sitting at the core of the platform, coming out of it is different ways of working with that data. So whether you like coding in R or Python, we have a Python and R SDK, so you can analyze data in that way. You can integrate data directly into public maps and dashboards using sort of that kind of specific API, and I won't go into too many technical details here. Or if you wanted to integrate it into GIS software, you can use the OGC Features API that we host. And also we're seeing a lot more people wanting to use or integrate data directly into AI and analytics tooling. So we support that as well. There's a small QR code on the bottom of the platform on the page. So if you'd like to look at the platform more, I'd happily encourage you to do so. But I wanted to talk about the role of industry in filling data gaps. It's been a mandate of HubOcean since we've started to encourage and promote the sharing of industrial data. We published this report that I think Rita referenced at the beginning, which we did a study a few years ago of the OBIS and GBIF repositories, and found that only 3% of the data shared in those repositories were coming from industrial sources. And we know that industrial companies collect huge amounts of data relevant for science and blue economy. And so we wanted to just highlight that disparity in that gap. And actually, I'll show in a little bit, and Laura already showed that the contribution the industry can make can be really significant, but it's not without its challenges. And I won't focus on all of the challenges in this talk because there are many, and we need to recognize that it's not an easy process for some companies to be able to come and share things which they've traditionally not had a history of doing. So there are political, there are social, and there are technical barriers to overcoming that. So it's important to recognize that. And I'm going to focus more on the technical barriers. So when we started working with TGS a few years ago, they were very open to sharing data, which was fantastic. It was really great, and it was a real step in a good direction. They shared 12 years worth of environmental data on offshore surveys, which included current measurements, CTD, and biodiversity observations. And they effectively gave us all of this data on a hard drive, probably a little bit more technically advanced, but it did come as it was. And so when we first received the data, it was files. And so we'd first of all, and to Dick's point about the requirements of having very good and strong metadata, the first thing that we did was to document those files and write metadata so we could at least geographically subdivide those data to see where we actually had information. That was the first step. We then published those files on Ocean Data Platform. So if you want to, you can go back and track the history or the provenance of where we've derived sort of more analytics ready data from. So as part of the data collection that I shared earlier, you can go back and you can get this files history of all of these different data types. But of course, if you want to integrate this kind of data into any kind of application, it needs to be much richer, harmonized in a much richer way. And that's something that we did next, is to sort of go through these files and standardize them into sort of tables so that it's standardized tables. And eventually then with the biodiversity data, and this is to the point that Dick was making just before, we then converted it into the Darwin core format so that could be uploaded into OBIS. And I should say there's also something that we've learned along the way as well, and Clara will talk to the importance of this later. When we shared, that was the first time that we'd done this process at Hub Ocean, so we shared it with the OBIS node in Norway. We've subsequently learned that actually we should have shared that through the OBIS GBIF node in Brazil, because there's a really important there is a really strong important role for making sure that the nodes of OBIS and GBIF, for example, know which data they have in their national waters. It's a very important learning point for us. We learned that lesson. And any data that we now work with will be directly with the country nodes of these kinds of repositories. And I'm looking forward to Clara talking about that in a bit. Anyway, the data is then available on Ocean Data Platform. And I just wanted to show a really quick thing. So when we started this journey a few years ago, it was a little bit of a manual process. But what we've done now is sort of turned that into a much more seamless activity. So if you do want to share data on Ocean Data Platform, it's really easy to do. So this is a sort of a live recording. So this isn't sort of sped up or anything, just to show the process of just taking files, uploading them to the platform. And then this, to start with, this is just private. So only I would have access to these files. But what I can do is I can actually straight away make that data either give different people access rights, or I can share it publicly. So now actually this data set is, of course, I deleted it because there's not enough metadata there, but in principle this data is now shareable to anybody. So you can go from having no sharing of data to sharing data in, I think that was a minute. And I think this is what we see the world moving towards, this much more rapid process of being able to share data and a way of lowering the barriers. And of course, the work of then turning that into, for example, Darwin core formats for biodiversity data would take a little bit more processing, but we think that a significant hurdle of overcoming just sharing of files is really important. Otherwise, it just sits on a hard drive and it just doesn't get shared. So that was the sort of sharing of data, and then I just wanted to sort of show then the value of, once it has been shared, what that means. And this is a really important story, especially when we're working with industrial partners who constantly ask, why should we invest the effort and time into sharing data? It's going to cost us money, it's going to cost us time. So what is the importance? So as part of the work that we did with TGS is we actually compared the biodiversity observations that they shared with us with the observations that were available in OBIS. So here you can see the TGS PGS data in and around the Brazilian waters. And I'm just showing some sort of platform features as well, like querying data, which you can, of course, do in Ocean Data Platform. But then being able to visualize these contributions from industry alongside global repositories like OBIS. So here you can see the OBIS contribution repositories, and the yellow is the TGS. And you can see here that this is really filling in. Visually, you can see this is filling in a data gap. It's not just sort of adding, stacking more information on the same location that there was data before, but actually it's filling temporal and geographic data gaps, which is it's a really good story to tell. So finally, I'll just sort of show a little bit of the kind of the next phase of what can you do once data is shared openly. This is an example of an application which is being recently developed as part of a way of monitoring impacts of shipping on biodiversity. And again, this relies on having openly available, publicly shared data to inform, so that companies can be informed on their operations and their, for example, proximity to, in this case, it's whale sensitive areas from the World Shipping Council. But again, that relies on having shared publicly available data. So this was just trying to end the loop of saying, once you have shared data, you can then get insights and analytics to inform your activities for a business. We see more and more interest in, for example, the TNFD reporting framework of needing to have this kind of data available to be able to inform their decisions and businesses going forward. So I'll just say thank you very much for the time. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And again, if you'd like to visit the platform, there's a QR code. We're all using QR codes now. It's not optimized for phones, but at least you'll get a point in the right direction. So thank you very much.
Tom, thank you very much. Your presentation I think you were able to provide a nice overview of the good work that Hub Ocean is doing in terms of make it easier to share data. And now I think everyone is looking forward to hear from Clara Fonseca. You already gave some hints, Tom, what Clara will talk about. So, Clara, I think you are ready to step in and to share with us, as your title says, what is the role of global repositories in closing the gaps that still exist in marine data.
Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good morning in Brazil, yes.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to participate in this very interesting, highly relevant webinar on the mobilization analysis of marine and ocean data. Today, I will talk about the role of global and national repositories in closing data gaps, and mainly focusing biodiversity, GBIF, and OBIS. Yeah. So before continuing, I would like to briefly introduce myself and our team. My name is Clara, and I am a biodiversity data specialist at the Brazilian Biodiversity Information System. The National Biodiversity Platform system is coordinated by the Ministry of Science and Technology and maintained and operated by the National Education and Research Network, which is responsible for the data management, data mobilization, platform content, and the operation of the system. Since 2025, we are GBIF IOBIS node, and we are also part of the GBIF staff since 2019. Everybody has already talked about FAIR principles, but I'm gonna just spend a few minutes. National portal and global repositories were developed to implement these FAIR principles, an approach that promotes open science. Their goal objective is to make scientific data shareable, standardized, and most importantly, reusable. So when a company or organization, a scientific institution or private sector manage data and wants to promote open science, the first question it should ask it whether its data is fair. So is my data fair? So for that, to assess this, some questions to be considered. Like, for example, are the data findable? Are they available in a repository where others can discover? Are they accessible? Do I have a DOI, or do I have a link that I can download access to this information? Are they interoperable? Do we use standards that we call ecological metadata language that we can understand and share tables between institutions? And the most important one, are they reusable? Do the data have a clear license that allows and reuse while respecting authorship and intellectual property? They have like citation guidelines, DOI that I can use. So once you can ask all these questions positively, then your organization data can be considered fair. So in Brazil, in the national system, which is similar to other national systems, we have different types of data publishers. Data publishers, the people that goes to the field and collect, are the most important people that have the data. So these are the publishers in the national system. We have public and private universities, research institutes, citizen science, NGOs. We have federal agencies and government institutions, long monitor ecologic networks, and private sector as well, which contributes of the 5.7% of the total recurrence records at the national level. We also have like this indigenous and local communities data that they're also start publishing through the national system. So I'm gonna, all this data at the national level, they are published or shared through global platforms like OBIS and GBIF. For those who may not be familiar with GBIF, it is headquartered in Denmark and operates as a network of countries that support the infrastructure through annual financial contributions. So in green are voting participants, which pay a little bit to maintain all the infrastructure, while those in blue are observers or associate members. So together, they contribute a very large number of records, more than 3 billion records, datasets, publishers, and there is also a very high number of scientific publications using this data. In the case of OBIS, the governance is a little bit different, as becoming a node does not require any annual membership, and they are based in Belgium. But they have lots of measurements and facts, which is it's important for marine data. So there's a little bit different. There are some difference in terms of taxonomic backbone, data types, and data quality assessments, but they use the same publishing tools, so they're both interoperable between them. But they use same standards and same data extensions. But however, as already mentioned, only 3% more or less from private sector is shared. So in this way, Brazil, as well as in OBIS and GBIF, it seems that companies neither publish or neither benefit from making their data available in repositories. I'm not sure if you know about these Ecuador principles. The Ecuador principles were launched in 2003, and there are a set of guidelines adopted by financial institutions to assess and manage environmental and social risks in finance and projects. That's not contributed with GBIF directly, but yes, indirectly, because these Ecuador, like also, how do you say, encourage the use of publication of data to do the environmental risk assessments. And also, if they produce data, they're also encouraged to publish through GBIF. And if you want to publish through GBIF, GBIF will ask you where you're from. And if you are from Brazil or Norway or Japan or Portugal, they will ask you to talk with the national node. So this is, yeah. And then there's another important initiative that the GBIF and TNFD are now working together in partnership to mobilize data from the private sector, aiming to better understand the need for and relevance of data sharing. So they also have like a few webinars, and the coming one is on the March 31st about GBIF and TNFD recommendations. So in Brazil, we create Brazil Business Sector Environmental Licensing Network. We organize all the companies that publish through the national level, and then they share all this information to global repositories. Okay, so I'm going to explain like a Brazilian case. The Brazilian Institute of Geographic and Statistics, IBGE, from Brazil conducts analysis on data quality, availability, and sampling coverage. So in 2022 was the first assessment showed that 81% of marine grid cells in Brazil had no occurrence records, and compared to only 6% of terrestrial cells that there's no occurrence records as well. So that shows us that we need to improve our mobilization data in Brazil, and specifically in the marine data. So yeah, the next report is expected in 2026, and it will be increasing data sets from the private sector. We repatriate data sets from OBs, and we are engaging new data publishers. So it's really important to have this at a national level, because we have like some international commitments with the CBD, and we need to respond as a country. So a little bit more information about this report. So it is marine cells. In white, no records. In gray, a few. In red, sufficient records to calculate sampling completeness. So we have a long way to go. So what we propose at the national level is like, if a company or institution wants to publish your data, you go to the field, you collect, you become a publisher at a national and international level, you prepare your data, you organize your data in Darwin Core, you upload it through IPT, which is a tool used by GBIF, Brazil, and also OBs and other institutions. Then you publish through at a national level, you register your data set, you ensuring national sovereignty in governance, you get your DOI for the scientific purposes, and then you share through OBIS in GBIF, and then you share through other institutions. We have like other platforms, that perform more complex and integrated analysis, and we support, the national node supports and provides technical support through the entire process. So I think the benefits of sharing data, we all know: reduce biodiversity data gaps, improve ecosystem knowledge, enable collaboration like this, and share best practices, promote open science, support better decision making, and environmental planning and increase visibility and business opportunities. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Clara, for the overview of what's going on within Brazil and research and the collaboration with industry. And with this, before I give the floor to Sara Pitonet again, the Blue Cloud coordinator, in fact, there were some points here that I believe they are not new, although they need to be much more valued and also implemented in our daily life for those who work with marine research. And in fact, I'm going to share a LinkedIn post that we did on Blue Cloud around 10 months ago, where the Blue Cloud team was at OSHA's 2025 conference that took place in Brest in France. And in fact, some of the things that we mentioned here that were important were also mentioned there. So there is something that should even be mentioned and implemented in the near future in order to develop marine science. The fact that the marine data needs to follow the fair data principles to allow open science. Also the fact that we need not only to exchange observation modeling capabilities, but is also important to, while doing this, that we facilitate knowledge sharing. And the fact there is a high amount of ocean data that is not still fully accessible, especially the data that are from different locations. They are not combined together, and this needs to be done in order to promote collaboration and also to increase the knowledge we have about the oceans, where like 70% of the planet is covered by ocean, but unfortunately only 1% of the science budget is used on marine science. And one point that was also mentioned at the conference, and that's the main topic of today's webinar, is research and industry need to collaborate much more together in order to collect new sources of data, in order to increase the knowledge we have about the ocean. So I'm going to put the link of this LinkedIn post for those if you want to check. But in the meantime, I'm happy to give the floor again to Sara, who will share some important inputs of Blue Cloud next activities. But before giving this to Sara, I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you for all the speakers who were here with us to talk about the importance of marine and research sector collaborate with the industry sector. And with this, I'll pass the floor to Sara.
Thank you, Rita, and thank you all for this webinar. Let me just, I'll share with you one last slide. It's more a next step than a real conclusion, because, here it is. Okay, so we are continuing this series. So on the 16th of April, a third webinar will be organized around the theme of artificial intelligence for ocean literacy. Again, this is done in partnership with other initiatives, including Imaging Project, Edito, and partners such as Ifremer, Plus Atlantic, Geomar, and more. So we're all invited to join. And then, last but not least, so I mentioned that Blue Cloud started 6 years ago, and now it's not really coming to an end, it's taking a different shape, let's say. So we are inviting all of you in person on the 28th of May in Brussels for the Blue Cloud conference that will formally announce this next phase and will welcome the EOSC node of the EOSC node Digital Twin Ocean as new funded initiative. So you're all welcome to join. You will learn more about not just the the data effort that we have put into these years, but also you learn about the results of the virtual labs, of the workbenches that will showcase the services that are ready for uptake. So the webpage is already available. You're free to join. We're very happy to have you all in person in Brussels. And thank you once more for joining us today, and thank you to all the speakers for presentations.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm afraid I'm back. Just to share, if you want to join us for those events, we pasted the links on the chat, so you can easily register. But before we leave, we have one question to Clara from Julie McCarthy. So, Clara, I'm not sure you have the opportunity to read it already, but Julie would like to know what types of industrial data are currently most underrepresented within OBIS, in your opinion.
Like in marine, we have mainly two companies that publish the marine data. It's Total Energies, which are there from France, but they have like different activities in the countries. So you have in Colombia, Suriname, Brazil. So they are the main public. They sign Ecuador principles, and so they share this information about plankton mainly, and so we need data for like all types of data. But I work with biodiversity, so we need to mobilize data from all different groups, and we don't publish maps or shapes like abiotic information. But this so I don't know about that, but we need all of different biodiversity groups.
Okay, so it's not just one type of data. There is a huge need. So on the different aspects related to marine research.
We know that there's been doing like lots of DNA expeditions as well, and everything. So, but we don't know that these expeditions are being collecting in Brazil. So, and all expeditions in Brazil, they must register in the government, and I'm not sure if all are they doing that.
Tom, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just to add on to that point, the last point that Clara made is a really interesting one, actually. I think increasingly a lot of companies operating offshore are looking towards eDNA technologies to fill the gaps that they have, or to lower the costs in monitoring of marine biodiversity in and around their operations. And that, I think, it presents a really good opportunity for getting a lot more data into public infrastructures and to promote data sharing. But it's also a challenge because, well, certainly I know in Brazil, Clara, because we've been having these conversations, there are and I'm not a DNA specialist, but I know that the reference libraries aren't really there to be able to be able to support the kind of like eDNA monitoring that a lot of companies want to have. So then again, there's a real need for sort of public-private collaboration in building those reference libraries to then be able to enable the companies to do that kind of monitoring, to then share the sort of useful data back to the public repository. So it's a really interesting and hot topic, I think, not least in Brazil, but around the world. And it's an interesting space to follow.
Thank you, Tom, for complementing Clara's inputs. And I don't see any more questions, neither any hand raised. I think with this we can close. Again, thank you on behalf of the entire Blue Cloud team for those who joined us, those who also were part of the list of speakers. We're very happy to have you with us. Again, friendly reminder, the presentations and recordings will be available the latest by tomorrow close of business, and we really hope to see you again in 1 month's time for the search webinar that Sarah mentioned, or to be with us in Brussels in May, or if you cannot be in Brussels, you can join us online. And with this, we wish you a pleasant end of afternoon, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you all.